All right, here we are. Story 4, my encounters with God and His angels. Before I start this story, it's actually a long story. I think I would probably have to split it into 2 parts. I call this Wolves in Sheep's Clothing and the Spirit Hawk. And it's quite an outstanding story in my opinion, in that I've never even heard of anything like this happening, except in mythology, or maybe American Indian lore. But I think I get around to part 2. There's the Spirit Hawk comes in. It's really a story about spiritual warfare. Before I get into this, I want to explain. I asked myself, why are you putting these out there? You know, I was hesitant to tell these stories, put my face out there in public. Well, then again, I'm not ashamed to admit these things happened and to give God credit. It's written in the Bible, in 2 Timothy. If we deny Him, He will also deny us. 2 Timothy 2:12. And in Luke 9:26, Jesus said, "Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man, will be ashamed of Him when He comes in His glory and in the glory of the Father and the holy angels." And I think that's fair enough. It's like you have friends. They say, "Are you a friend with him or her?" And you're like, "No, I'm not really. No, I just hang out with them or I work with them." That's kind of makes you unworthy to be a friend. And I think that's fair enough. Christ says if we deny Him and we're ashamed to admit that He's our Lord, then why should He treat us likewise? But at any rate, so I decided, no, I'm not ashamed. If I'm ashamed to tell these stories and put them out in public, the shame is on me. And I'm not going to endure that. So here we go. Story number 4. I was 27 at the time. I was living and working in a small town up in the Adirondacks. I'd just gone through a divorce. I didn't want a divorce. I don't believe in divorce, but sometimes you don't have any choice in these matters. I was estranged from my family, to say my parents. Everybody was far away. I'd just gotten out of the Army. I was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, and I got a job back in the Army as a training sergeant up in the mountains of the Adirondacks for an infantry company up there. So I had a good job, but I was just divorced, and I had lost custody of my kids. I fought for custody. I had to do something, I tried. I really tried. So it was a hard time for me at 27. Living in this town, I didn't know anybody. Had no friends, family, anywhere. And to make matters worse, get this, the government didn't pay me for, it turned out to be 3 months I went without pay. So I have a good job, I'm working, and I'm living in the woods. Up alongside, I had a Jeep. I took my Jeep up, found a logging trail up in the mountains, and found a place by a stream and called that home for a while, all by myself. Didn't have a tent, didn't have a dog, no friends, all alone. So I wound up going to church. I guess that's the silver lining in it. And the church became my family. I was going to church 3 times a week. Sunday mornings, Sunday evenings for prayer study, as much as I could go. But at this particular time, it was just Sunday. And I'm not going to say which church it was. I don't like to imply people. I loved it there. The congregation was only about 20 people, all poor, nobody, any money, so... Well, I remember the preacher used to invite me over for dinner once in a while, and he would ask me, was I saved? Was I born again? And I said, yes, I know Christ. He says, when was the exact moment you became saved? I said, I've always known God. I couldn't put a moment on it. I think I was born into it. He said, well, and I wasn't really saved, because he always could tell everybody exactly when he got born again. And nothing against that. That's how it worked for him. He was in college and wham, got hit with some kind of divine, and he got saved from that moment on and became a preacher. But in his mind, if you didn't have an experience like that, you weren't really born again. And in my mind, I didn't question his faith. But then again, some of us, it doesn't work that way. I've always kind of known God, everybody in their own way. Well, all right, I'm getting on to the story. This is part of it. I used to go to church, and I always sat in the back, and I'd listen to the preacher do a sermon. He'd call us all up front. Does anybody want to give their life to the Lord this day? Come forward, and his wife would play the piano and all that, and we'd go up front and give our life in front of everybody, dedicate ourselves to Christ, and say, I give my life to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. I'm a sinner. I, in my mind, feel you only have to do that once. I mean, my word is my word. If I say it once, I don't need to say it again. I mean, my word is good. It doesn't wear out in a week. But every week he wanted us to come forward and do this. And, I did this a couple times and I stopped. And I just thought, that's not necessary. It's not necessary. Once is enough. This one week, all right, let me backlog. There were a couple members in that church, a young man and a woman, who was known that they were trying to have a baby, and they couldn't have a child. They were married. They were probably 30 years old, both of them. They couldn't have a child for whatever reason. Well, suddenly she's pregnant, and this is their joy. They thank God for this, and it was a wonderful thing, and they were just blessed and really happy with this news that they were going to be parents. Back to this one sermon. I'm sitting in the back, and this young couple's a couple in front of me. There's very few people in this church. The preacher asked us again, does anybody here want to come forward and be saved? I didn't go forward. Nobody went forward. I guess they all felt the same as me. It was unnecessary. He wouldn't let us. We had our heads bowed. Everybody bow your heads in prayer. And he kept saying, he said, I can do this all day until somebody comes forward. I knew for a fact everybody in that congregation had already been forward to be saved before. He started getting ugly. Started to get ugly. And at this point, I lifted my head up. I don't put on acts for anybody. I'm looking right at him. He's saying, and you there, looks right in my eyes. Looks me right in the eyes. I know you want me to stop doing this, he says. I know you want to go home and watch the football game and all this, and you don't want to be here. And I'm thinking, if he only knew, his congregation, that I not only don't watch football or TV, I don't own a TV, and I don't own a home. In fact, I'm living out in the woods on the other side of the mountain by myself. How little he knows of us. Then he crossed the line with me. He said, and you too, in front, out there, addressing the young man and woman who just they've got a child and they're very joyous about it. He says, when your baby is born deformed or mentally retarded, he says, I want you to remember back to this day when you could have given your life to the Lord and you didn't. And I could not believe that this man did this. I looked at the woman and the man in front of me. He put his arm around me. I'm looking at their backs and their heads are still bowed. And I can see her back. She's crying. I can see her shoulders heave. And the man puts his arm around her. I could not believe that this man did this. And it really blew me away. And he went on for a little while, and I just stared at him, glared at him, more like it. I may be in church. Because I was in church is the only reason I didn't go up there and throw him to the ground. I'll let you understand something. I was a strong man then, very physically fit, but not violent. All right, back to the story. The sermon got over with. We all file by. He's at the door. Have a blessed day, and all this and that, shaking our hands. I came up to him. What do you think I did? He said, have a blessed day. I said, thank you, sir. Thank you, thank you. I didn't say a thing. I'm in church. I'm not going to attack the man at all, anywhere. I'm not going to say anything disrespectful. I'm in God's house. I left. Now, let me tell you something that happened to me that very day before I went to church. I'd gotten on the phone, a pay phone in these days, to talk to my children. And it meant a lot to me to talk to my children. They were very far away, and I was all alone and heartbroken. And I'm talking to my daughter, and my wife's new boyfriend picks up the phone right in the middle of our conversation. He says, I don't think so. Click, hangs up. That really, really hurt me. So when this man did this in church that day, I was really looking forward to church that day. And he did this to that young couple in front of me. I don't care about his attacks on me. But when he hurt them, like he did, I was devastated. And for the very first time in my life, I was ready to throw away my faith. I was ready to just walk away from Christianity. I was ready to just walk away from it all. And the death, my faith, and my belief, there's nothing left to live for at that time. My wife and kids were gone, and I was all alone. And now my faith in God seemingly had been shattered. My faith wasn't shattered, but I just had enough of everything at that point. I got in my Jeep when I left that church, and I started racing through the mountains as fast as I could make that thing go. Really didn't care if I flew off a cliff and got killed or not. In fact, I was almost looking for that. Probably the only thing that stopped me was thinking that my kids would have, thinking of my children. So there's a place in Whitehall, New York, called Death Rock. And it's a very huge mountaintop in the Adirondacks, very tall, all woods till you get to the top. It's got a bald top on it, just rock, like a lot of the mountains are up there. I decided I'd go for a walk up there to the top and make it to Death Rock. The legend behind Death Rock is during the French and Indian War, they say an Indian woman fell in love with a British officer. And they were in love, supposedly, 1750s. He had to go back home. Couldn't bring her with him. Left her. She was heartbroken. The legend has it that the Indian woman threw herself off Death Rock. And it looks to be about 1,000-foot drop, sheer drop on one side. It's like gently rolling up and a flat drop off on one end of it. So I parked my Jeep at the base of this mountain that Sunday, distraught, faith destroyed, spirit, soul wrenched, and I started walking up this mountain. I didn't take a trail. I just walked up through the woods, up climbing over rocks. Take you a good 45 minutes to get to the top of it if you're young and in shape. If you're not young and in shape, you're not going to get to the top of it. Good chance. So, I was young and in shape then. Now here's where the thing happens. God knew the shape I was in. Destroyed like I was. Spiritually, emotionally destroyed. Ready to walk out. I didn't want to turn my back on God. All right, here's the thing. This is exceptional. You hear the story. I look above me at the base of that hill. I'm in the woods, walking up, and I see a hawk flying right above the treetops. And it was a sunny day out. It was summertime. And it stayed hovering like on a hot breeze. Now, it didn't need to flap its wings or anything. Just kind of hovering right at the treetops. I look up at it, and I see it kind of, tilts its head and looks down at me. See its little eye and everything. We made eye contact. And as I walked up the hill, I exaggerate not. That thing never left me. That hawk never left me. It didn't fly off and come back. It stayed right above me at treetop level. No exaggeration. Just gliding right above me. I look up and I see it, and I started smiling. And before long, I thought this was an answer to my prayers, because God somehow, through this hawk, he manifests himself in nature. And this thing followed me all the way up to Death Rock, to the top. It never once left me. Never once left me. I get to the top of Death Rock, and I know this is unnatural, what this bird is doing. I look up, even when I'm on the very pinnacle of this rock, and there's no trees, it's just stayed up there right above me, gliding right on the breeze, never flew off. Looking down at me, I'm looking up at it. At this time, my faith is restored. I'm talking to God. Everything's good again. Smile on my face. A big change from earlier that morning, when I pretty much wanted to kill myself. Didn't care about myself or my soul. I start walking down the hill. The hawk followed me all the way down the hill. About 45 minutes, one way, up and down. Never left me, all the way down. I look up, the hawk's right there, gliding right above the treetops, right close down, looking right at me. I get to the bottom of the hill. I'm still in the woods. Get this. I look up for my hawk. I had a friend. I felt like he was my hawk friend. I felt like we knew each other. I look up. He's gone. Suddenly he's gone. I'm like, oh, kind of sad. Felt a connection, And I'm standing there where I look up. For the first time, I notice the hawk is gone. And I look down at my feet. Get this. Right at my feet, where I stopped to look up and found him gone, were the bones and feathers of a hawk. I am not kidding you. I mean, it was a hawk. You could tell by the bill and the feathers, and right where I stopped to look up at my hawk friend, and it's gone, were the bones and feathers of a hawk. Looks like it'd been there a year or so. There's no flesh, just feathers and bones, and the skull with a big hawk bill on it. Well, I knew this was a sign of God. I knew that this was special. Didn't know how or what, but I knew it was. My faith was restored, and the story doesn't end here. I told you in story 2 or 3, I believe 2, God, when he starts something, he goes further than we even think. I think the story ends, it doesn't. I was going to pick up a feather, keep it for a souvenir, and I thought, no, leave it alone. So I walk down the hill. I go to the same phone booth I was at that morning, where somebody rudely grabbed the phone and hung up on me when I was talking to my daughter. And I called my daughter, and this time I got to talk to her, my sons. I have 4 kids. And everything was good. I told them I was doing good, and here's where the story continues on, and this is where it closes at this point. I look over and I see a guy I knew from the guard unit. One of the men I was training, a soldier in the guard unit. And he just happened to be walking by, and he says, "Hey, Sergeant Shank, hey, how you doing?" I just hung up. He says, "Hey, we've got a church meeting tonight where I go to church. Want to know if you wanted to go?" And tell you the truth, I'm still kind of beat up from church that morning. I don't know. I'm still kind of a little beat up inside. But and he says, "Well, we're meeting at 7. He told us at church. He says, "You're welcome to attend." I said, "Well, thank you, and have a good day." He took off. I thought about it. Maybe this wasn't a coincidence, him inviting me to church after everything had just happened in the story I told you of. So I decided, well, maybe I should go to church. As be foolish not to. So I go to church 7 o'clock that evening. I walk in there. First thing, there's a bunch of men there. It's a men's prayer meeting. This older man, bald-headed man, Pastor Benham, very good man, now long gone, on to be with the Lord. He looks at me and he says, "Hello, Tim." He says, "Have you given your life to the Lord? Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior?" And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. Because the other guy, when I told him, well, I've always known God, he told me, no, I couldn't have, or unless I had a mountain lightning bolt kind of experience like he did. I said, yes, I have, expecting my faith to be attacked. He said, well, that's good enough for us. He says, come on in, join us. Whew. Oh, I thought, these were a good bunch of people I met. Every one of them was good people. Very small group of men. All sorts of. And that turned out to be quite a blessing for me. And it was a good time. So, yeah, I wound up getting very close to that church, and it was not a bad thing. You know, I wanted to say the Marines have I was 20 years in the Army. Paratrooper, tank commander, all kinds of stuff. The Marines always have a saying, Semper Fidelis, means always faithful. Well, that doesn't just apply to the Marine Corps. Semper Fidelis also applies to God and us. He didn't abandon me that day. That morning, spiritual warfare, I had so much going against me. With the jerk on the phone with my kid, and that wolf in sheep's clothing, I call him, at that one church that just assaulted and darn near destroyed that young couple in front of me that were expecting a child. Little did I know that we are assaulted in this world physically and spiritually, morally. But we have helper. God is always faithful. He sent a hawk. He used a dove. There's examples. The spirit and a dove. I'm not anybody holy. I guess he used a hawk for me. But yeah, he's always faithful. And hang in there. He'll send you a helper during the darkest times. That's it. Story 4, the wolves in sheep clothing and spirit hawk. You have stories, share them. Thank you. Story 5, coming up, hopefully before the snow flies.